Well, welcome again to GPS. And I don't know how many we've actually done, 50-some, 60? Somewhere over the last couple of years, I guess, we've been doing it.
Show 66, I believe.
Is it 66 now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So none of us realized that we would go at the particular pace we have. We thought we would do a show or two per chapter and be done and go on to some other project. But we have gotten into the text deeper in a deeper way, and if you're watching, you've stayed with us, so we're thankful. We're beginning to meet people as we go speaking different places. Oh, we've seen you on GPS. So thank you for those of you that have been part of this. So anyway, God's Prophetic Surprise, Dr. Jon Paulien, Sara Colon, and I'm Dan Smith. But we do have a transition that we're not real happy about. As we tape this, the whole world doesn't know, but by the time this is out to all of you, it will be more clear. So Sara has been our youth pastor at Garden Grove Church for 4 years, and on this for 2 years we've been taping, something like that?
A year and 5 months, maybe?
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's her last show. She will leave at the end of the year to go to her next place. So we're going to have you talk and give all your final wisdom and your best ideas and answer all the hard questions. If you could just start with who the 144,000 are and settle that today.
I know them all by name, actually.
So we have not brought flowers or cake or ice cream or anything. Her desire is to slip away and just be gone, but we're not going to let her completely do that. Anyway, we have loved having you here.
Thank you.
There's only one Sara May in the world, and we love her, and she's a delight. And it was John's idea that he said, let's have a young person join us, not just have 3 or 4 old Revelation men here. Let's have some variety of opinions and viewpoints and life experiences. Mm-hmm. They've known each other all Sarah's life, and she calls him Uncle John. Anyway, I'll just speak for myself. We have loved having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for driving an hour every time and bringing your own angle and your way and your questions and your personality. We'll find someone else to sit in the chair, but no one else will be Sara May.
They'll do great. They'll probably be scholars, and that will probably help you a little bit.
We don't need no stinking scholars.
Yeah, no more scholars.
You can give your testimonial, then we'll go on.
Yes, no, I really appreciate very much, Sara. This has, I think, transcended any expectations I have, and it seems like on every show at some point you come up with something that's like, whoa, that changes everything, and that's so you've been a blessing to me too.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So God bless you when you go to the next place.
Thank you.
Hope you'll miss us a little bit.
Always.
And but we want you to have a good time there and a good place in your life. Mm-hmm. But we were glad we had this stretch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've learned a lot from you guys, and I'm only on chapter 7.
Mm-hmm. So let's go. So find a Bible wherever you are, and we'll go to Revelation chapter 7. So all of a sudden, he has finished the 6 seals, and he has this going on to the one verse that we finished with last time in chapter 8, verse 1, on the 7th seal, the silence in heaven for half an hour. But in between, there is this glorious chapter on the sealing, and then this description, the great multitude standing before God, which everybody's heard those verses. So I don't know if we'll get all of that done today, but let's at least get started with chapter 7. Starting with the first few verses. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. So we can go in lots of places here, you two. So let us know where you think we should go. I assume this is the answer to the question, who can stand, at the end of chapter 6.
Right. That's very, very important to start with. That in chapter 6, verse 17, it says, the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Now, it's pretty evident that those calling for the rocks and mountains to fall on them aren't standing. Remember, we talked about that life-giving glory of God that surrounds him wherever God is manifest. And those who rebelled against God, those who do not desire those life-giving gifts. And I remember so beautifully how you treated that, Sarah. That was really helpful to me. So here we're looking at, all right, there's all these who will not be able to stand. Who will be able to stand? And the answer of chapter 7 is the 144,000 and the great multitude. So the big question as we go through is, are these two groups, or are they one group with two different names?
So you can settle that before we're done today. So.
And we'll come to that before too long. But to understand that chapter 7 is the response to verse 17 of chapter 6. This sets it up.
So if all the verses and chapter divisions were never there in the first place anyway, right? These are all...
Actually, this is probably a good chapter division, but it's important not to just start with 7:1 and miss that it's building on something else. Just like chapter 6 should not be read without chapter 5. If you're not aware of chapter 5, chapter 6 is not going to make a lot of sense at all.
Where is this phrase, the angels are holding back the winds of strife? It's not here. Where does that phrase come from? Everyone knows that phrase. You use that phrase. Everyone recognizes it. Does it come from an early version of this? From King James or somewhere? Where does that phrase come from?
Well, I would imagine that originally it's found in a commentary on the book of Revelation. And
like Uriah Smith commentary or somewhere else?
Perhaps, but probably earlier than that. And someone like an Ellen White would have come along and read that and said, "Well, that's kind of nice.
It ended up in the book.
I can build a whole, a whole scenario off of that." So I haven't researched the background to it, but I imagine that that's kind of the path it went.
If the angels are holding back the winds of strife, does that mean that God in heaven has decided in his wisdom where all suffering should be and where it has to stop? Bill O'Reilly, which is the week we're taping here, Bill O'Reilly, who got put out from Fox News because he harassed women, had to make huge payments, one of them for $32 million, that came out this week. And he said in a national interview this week he was mad at God because God didn't protect him. So the angels that are holding back the winds of strife hold back something, but don't hold back for him. Why and where does God choose the line where that is? Stop this war. It's probably the heart of... I have a guy right now, I spend one night every week studying. I'll be with him again Wednesday night this week. And this is the biggest battle for him. You know, you've met him. 29 years old, nurse at hospital, grew up in the Adventist system, church system. But he would move that line in a different place. He said, I would stop it. If I knew my kid was going to be in trouble and be hurt by being on that tricycle, I would never let her be on that tricycle. I wouldn't protect my child. Why doesn't God move this line? Why is the line here?
God's not a helicopter parent.
It's not?
Helicopter parent.
Yeah,
that's a term people use for the parents that won't let the kids do anything. You know, put on a suit of armor when they go out to bike, things like that. God is a God of freedom. And we're only going to learn some things if we're free to make mistakes and free to discover from that exploration. So I see God, let's put it this way, things would be a lot worse if God wasn't restraining.
Yes.
If Satan was allowed to fully and completely do everything exactly the way he would want, the carnage would be unbelievable. But the reality is the Holy Spirit is restraining more than we realize. And the big question is not why is there so much evil in the world. I think the big question is why is there so much good in the world. When you see the trend of everything, it's surprising how much goodness there is.
There is. Mm-hmm. Did you feel when you stepped on that glass in the dark? You've been on crutches. People can't see it today, but you were. Last time you were on crutches. You've had 6 or 7 weeks, pretty miserable time. Did you think God should have let you put your foot some other place than that glass? You thought, I shouldn't have put the glass there.
I think, yeah, that was more my thought process. Like, what was I thinking?
You didn't blame God.
No. But I'm like a weird person when it comes to that. Like, I just don't think, maybe it's dysfunctional. I don't think the entire universe revolves around me. And so I don't think everything that happens is a direct correlation to an attack on me or a lifting up of me.
Do you pray? There's no secret you're not always well.
Right.
Do you pray to have that be relieved? Do you ask God to have the angels tighten up in their line?
No, but see, again, I think I'm slightly morbid, where I know I have genetic problems, right? And they're not going to go away. Since birth, I knew this. And so for me, it's never been take it away as much as help me to be a good person.
Cope with it.
Yeah, I don't expect it to just disappear. I just don't want to be a jerk. And some days when I don't feel well, I want to punch everyone in the throat because I'm like, you have no idea, But at the same time, that's not my goal in life is to be a good person to other people, and I want that to be what people remember, not sickly.
And I think you have pulled that off, because I think when it comes time, when you announce it to our youth and church and everybody, most will be shocked that you have not been well.
Yeah.
Often.
Right. But I think also, I think people demonize God because they want to be able to put blame somewhere. And I think some circumstances are just the worst, and there's no way out of them, and there's no explanation, and there's no way to solve the problem. And so the easiest thing to do is to try to find something to blame, and often that just ends up being God, because we don't know. We don't know if, it was intentional, if it was not intentional, and
people are comforted with the idea that all suffering goes through the heart of God before it gets to us. If you've heard that line, is that God has chosen, or the idea that God never allows us to have more than we can bear,
right.
Which I think is a misuse of the text in Corinthians.
I agree.
But people do think that. Why is that a comfort to them, to say God has felt this before it got to me and decided that this would be a good thing?
I think it's people's personal pep talks. I mean, I remember I still get these comments, the people that do know about my life or the things I go through very often will say oh, wow, God has huge plans for you, because if you've been through all of this stuff your entire life, oh, you're going to...
a wounded healer.
Yeah, you're going to be a rock star when you're older. And I'm like, really? That's just really messed up. Granted, I learn a ton every year of my life. And so there is no negating that. But and that does make me a better person. But at the same time, I think we try so hard to find someone to blame, no matter what the situation is. In a practical side, if you're going through a relationship and the breakup, notice how it's very rarely your own fault. It's always someone else's fault, and it's just so much easier to go through life pegging it on other people and other circumstances. And I think that kind of does God a disservice, because I do believe that God is in control. I do believe God is an all-loving, all-knowing, all-everything God. But at the same time, I don't think God's, sitting there saying, you know what, Sarah has a very high tolerance for pain. Let's see how much we can give her. You know what I mean? That's just mean. And I just don't picture that. And I don't picture that being, one, worth his time. And then two, that would be really messed up in my head if I had to process that every single day, blaming God for it. That would my relationship would be very volatile.
Well, we would have God up in heaven doing a massive calculation every second for every person to decide, do I allow this to happen or not? Do I let a lady stand in line for an hour and a half and get nothing done at the visa today? And decide, do I allow that or not? All the time.
Yeah.
Or do you say, I am just going to allow a great degree of freedom? We have allowed our son, who's 24, a great degree of freedom. Not total freedom. He can't trash our house, but his room is fairly trashed, but we allow that.
That was a personal giggle of I know.
I know one of those rooms.
That's where our angels are. We've said, you can't trash our house, your room, we'll try to close the door, and you choose that.
Yeah.
And we're not going to guide how you drive. If you drive poorly and have an accident, we're going to have to live with the suffering of that. But we did not choose every corner he drives, every speed he drives. We just said, you can drive.
Right. But I think if you look at it from the perspective, again, on a just surely practical note, when you see children, I hang out with my nieces and small children all the time, right? And when I'm around them, I have to make a conscious decision that I don't care how sticky they get while they eat, because otherwise I'm going to have to feed them and I'm going to be like not able to eat myself, right? So like I have to watch them just destroy all the land around them, and everything becomes goopy and sticky, and their clothes are covered, and I'm like, what on earth? Like, but at the same time, that's part of the learning how to eat process. Now they are more tactile. They can like figure out how to make it to their mouth.
If you don't have cause and effect, then you don't learn.
And I had to, like, I remember the first time I was babysitting, I was freaking out because like food was everywhere. And I was like, I'm gonna have so much to clean up. And it was like miserable to think about. But then I realized like, they're infants, they're teeny tiny children. Like they're supposed to be a mess right now. And that's part of how you get to the point where you're no longer sticky after you're done eating as an adult. If I spoon fed them till they were 20, they would not do so great in society.
So you think God looks at you as a sticky child?
I'm pretty sure he looks at me as a sticky child. I'm not sure what he looks at you about. I'm a bit of a disaster zone, so.
I've been sticky more than once. Yeah.
But I think, you know, we're just learning. We're starting to pick up the pace and figure it
I
out.
said to this young man, you know, if you kick the soccer ball, and no matter how you kick it, you trust God to veer the ball into the one spot that goes into the soccer goal, no one would ever learn how to play soccer.
Yeah.
You just pray and blast it in the way you want. Or you have to learn from the ones that missed how to shoot it so that it goes to the right place.
Right. Well, and I always laugh because we always think that our prayer is like the thing that changes God's mind. And I always found that very messed up because, you know, for example, I may have a specific football team that is opposing your football team. And if we're both praying, at what point is God like, all right, guys, just, you know what?
Tim Tebow, yeah.
Right. And I think it's unfair to say, you know, like, you don't have a good enough prayer life or you don't have a good enough relationship with God, and that's why things are happening. And I think that's just...
I can remember going to the grades at the seminary, you know, and going down to the grades, and I forget, it was a number in your grade, something like that. And I would see mine, I got an A, and I just unconsciously said, praise the Lord. And my friend got a B, and he said, where was God with me?
Praise the Dan.
And I regretted that I had said something. What about Matthew 5, where it says God is the God of the sun and the rain on the just and the unjust? How do we balance that verse where it looks like God is just allowing sun and rain to come with here, he does have some sort of limitation. He has intervened to some degree. Any answer for that?
Yeah. I don't know that I have answers to that, and I think that's the whole point of the book of Job. In the book of Job, it tells us why Job is suffering, but Job never finds out. In other words, the knowledge of why Job is suffering is held in heaven and is observed by readers of the book, but the characters in the book don't know what happened in heaven. They don't know the backstory. And so there's much more to these things than simply saying, oh, there's an explanation here for why you're suffering, et cetera. And interestingly enough, explaining the suffering doesn't necessarily help the sufferer. So I remember one time a dearly beloved teacher, his wife died of cancer. And I thought I'd give a brilliant explanation about the great controversy and how, you know, all these things play in and so forth. And in the middle of that, he just turned to, the only time he was ever severe with me, he turned to me and says, don't you ever do that to anyone else ever again.
Great day. Great day.
You know, because it was not the appropriate message for that appropriate time. And I don't know, Sarah, I think it's really relevant to ask the question, you know, how do you cope with chronic suffering?
Right.
What mechanisms help you to deal with it?
Honestly, I think I just lucked out in having a personality that can handle it. Like, I'm dead serious. I think, because I've tried to listen, you know, like I said, I worked as a chaplain for so long, and I heard everyone's story, and that's like the best part of chaplaincy.
Did you hurt them too?
Yeah. I've been on and off not well for years and years and years and years. So this is nothing new. But I think also, like, even knowing as a child, like, oh, you have a chronic disease, like, that can really mess with you as a kid. But at the same time, for me, it was just like, okay, you know, like, it was never a thing. Like, if I got sick, I'd say, how long? You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to know approximately how long I'm gonna have to barrel through this, and then I'll be fine. You know, and so, like, in my head, I think I've just always been that person that's okay with it. I'd say on a practical side, I mean, because when you deal with people in hospitals and brokenness and all that stuff, like I think it gets really hard because I don't think there's a formula. You know, when my brother gets sick, he doesn't handle it the same way I would. And it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just, for him, that's too much to bear in his brain. And he's like, nope, don't want to deal with any of this. This is miserable and I hate it. Whereas for me, I'm like, well, it's a good excuse to watch TV. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a different focus. And so I think for me, I try to refocus and find out things I can do. So it sounds so twisted, but I'll find ways of putting my energy towards something that normally I wouldn't be able to do. So like, okay, if I can't walk right now, then okay, this means I can paint. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not able to play sports, you know, or like something like that. And then I think, honestly, I try not to make that my focus of life. I try not to make that the thing that hinders me from being able to actually live. Like, yeah, I could focus on it and I could be depressed and I could sit in a corner.
Do you think that you could teach people to develop the skills that you were born with?
I think it's possible, but I think it would be really hard for some people to wrap their minds around because I don't think it's as complicated as people think. I think people overcomplicate, and it's not optimism, but I think people do overcomplicate something like optimism, you know, and they see it as fake or false. And if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. And so you can't force that. But I think there are practical things you can do in order to just live better. And I mean, that's what most like gurus and like life coaches and, you know, Buddhist and Hindu culture, that's like a lot of what they push forward is like live better, live well, you know, and they push forward for that. And I think that changes your mindset completely.
Write a book, Sarah.
Yeah, right.
That's good. No, I'm affirming what you said.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Sarah.
Yeah.
And you've modeled it and lived it. You know, none of us can get inside you, but obviously those of us who've been close to you know how consistently you have heard.
Yeah.
And have just admired that. But I think to write how you've handled that, that someday, we hope in this lifetime you will have days of relief.
Yeah.
We hope going to the new situation will be good for you. But yeah, I long for a second coming because I have pastored lots of suffering.
Yeah.
Lots of suffering. I pastored a large church. I've had 6 people with breast cancer at the same time in my church.
Yeah.
I had a mother and a daughter the same week, and I just I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
You know, one day I went to 8 different hospitals in a day. You know,
It gets
and
dark.
I want it to be better for these people.
Well, and I think part of knowing that you can't fix everything is helpful. Like, I think as pastors, as people in ministry, so often we want to just fix everything for everyone. And I think if we look at God, that's probably, he doesn't want suffering. He doesn't want all this. But then at the same time, there's only so much you can do. And so then you have to, you know, for me, I know I'm like, okay, I can't solve everyone's problem, but I can love everyone. And I can be a presence in their life in that pocket, and they can cry, and I can cry with them. And then, like, we feel a little bit better, at least, so we could take a next step. And, like, even if it's just a half a step each time, at least you're moving in a direction. It may not be super sneaky speed racer version, but, like, at least you're moving. And I think that's really important. And I think we miss out on that because I think we blame God. I think we pit things against God and pit things against religion and try to find everything to put a blame on, and it's unfair.
It's kind of a guy thing, isn't it, to want to fix everything?
Oh,
And so maybe it's an advantage as a female to be a chaplain or a pastor because you can love people instead. And, you know, that can be a...
Yeah, and I've discovered
thing.
that, like, I used to be very, like, point A to point B, fix it, and, like, here's the answer. Like, I was actually really good at math at one point because I liked the answer, and then I realized how upsetting it was to be able to just circle the answer and there's no discussion. You know, because, like, what if I thought that was the right answer? And there's no way I could, like, prove to my teacher that this was a different thing. And I realized I actually hate having the right answer. And so I've discovered that since I really do, I have to acknowledge that and say, okay, so this isn't how my brain works. And I'm just going to experience and see what happens. And anyways, enough about me.
Well, that all came out of
Revelation 7.
Came out of the winds of strife, didn't it?
It's right on the passage.
Yeah.
This is a huge part of our understanding of the Greek controversy, is that God has allowed a great degree of freedom We understand that there is still glue in the world, that he hasn't let the world completely fall apart.
Right.
The passage we just read last week about the mountains and islands moving and everything going completely nuts, we have some of that, but not, there's still a lot of stability. You can still go many places in the world and it's still stable and it's still beautiful. There are still wonderful moments of love. You're going to move to a place that's beautiful. And you're going to Hawaii, you know, and you will enjoy that.
Yeah.
We have to understand, you know, exactly why it's not more and not worse and not better. And because God has intervened, the Bible says the whole nature is groaning under sin. But there's also good, and the angels are holding it back.
Well, and I would just like to say, I mean, one of my favorite times, I remember asking my dad his favorite time or thing about pastoring, and he said funerals. And I remember looking at him, and I'm a morbid person, so I'm like, fair enough. But then I was like, but you're not, like, he's not a morbid person, so like, why? And he was talking about how beautiful it is to be able to be in healing moments with people after something so devastating. So you look at like natural disasters, earthquakes, fires, all these things, and you watch the attitudes that come out. Yes, there's the angry, like, want to destroy God and the rest of the world because their world's been destroyed. But then there's the other group that shows up and they have no reason to care. And they show up full blown and they love every single like thing about it. They volunteer their time, their resources. They give up pretty much their entire life for the next little bit to make sure these strangers are good. And like, if nothing else, that is the character of God coming through. And I think that's what's beautiful is that even in the midst of all the strife and chaos and all the unknowns and all the things that we could blame God for, it's like, but how beautiful it is that there's a side story happening as well that isn't dominating, you know, like it's there. The good is still there. It's just we get distracted.
We're going to put this show on the top of the website. Jon, we don't have long. Would you just say a prayer as we send Sara away? I want to make sure that we get enough of the prayer done. We've got 2 minutes, so it has to be less than 2 minutes.
That's right.
Would you just bless Sara and thank the world for her and God for her and bless her as she goes? Would that be fair?
Well, I feel like I hardly got a word in edgewise in this program, and yet it's going to be one of my favorites, and we really enjoy having this special get-to-know-you moment with Sara. So, Lord, we thank you right here on this show. We thank you for your presence in all things. We thank you that you've been with Sara from the beginning. We thank you that you have filled her life and that in spite of these unfortunate things that are part of her life, through not her choice, and I believe also not your choice, nevertheless, you can take us where we are and bring us to a beautiful place from there. And I pray that that would be her experience as she goes, that you would be with her. We thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Yes. We're going to miss you on this show and in many other ways, but
There will be many other goodbyes in the next few weeks, but this was at least one.
Yeah.
So we have no gifts, we have no train of people bringing farewell gifts, no gift cards, no nothing except our love. And if anybody wants to send an email, please feel free to send an email. We'll pass it on to her.
But let me say, this is a great introduction to the seals because it's the time of great stress and destruction in the world, and people need to cope. And Sara is an example of how to do that.
I want to encourage everyone to ask tons of questions to these guys and confuse them. That's all I ask.
All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us. God bless you, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
God bless.